Poor girl is insulted for being in front of the fancy school until the school owner calls her in, and what he announces on the microphone changes the history of the institution. "Get out of the way, you human waste. This is no place for beggars." The phrase echoed through the luxurious entrance of Crownwood Academy, spoken by one of the wealthy mothers as she pushed a barefoot, rain-soaked girl who only wanted to shelter under the awning. All the students from New York's elite laughed. Parents, teachers, even the principal pretended not to see. The girl huddled in the corner, her donated uniform on her lap, her wet books on her lap, trying not to cry. When a security guard approached to brutally expel her, the crowd parted, and the most expensive car in the parking lot stopped right in front of her. The tinted windows rolled down slowly. It was the school's owner himself. Total silence. He got out, looked at the girl with fixed eyes, held out his hand and said, "Come with me." Everyone thought he would take her away, but instead he took her inside. And what he did next is paralyzed the entire auditorium. This girl has something none of you will ever have: courage. The firm voice of Mr. Lancaster, the billionaire founder of Crownwood Academy, boomed over the packed gymnasium's speakers. He interrupted the annual ceremony to deliver some bombshell news. The girl who was humiliated at the school gates would become an honor student for life, with a full scholarship, a room at an elite boarding school, and direct access to international exchange programs. Parents huffed in anger, students whispered, teachers glanced at each other uncomfortably. But none of that mattered. The microphone was still in his hand. And before hanging up, he revealed something no one there expected. This isn't the first time she set foot in this school. Many years ago, she was unfairly rejected by me. And now I'm righting the most shameful mistake of my life. Because what she did for me back then saved my daughter, and none of you even know it. Before continuing, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and like this video so you can continue receiving our real stories. Thank you very much. The morning was grey in Manhattan, and the light rain gave a silvery sheen to the already gleaming luxury sidewalks in front of Crownwood Academy. It was early fall, and the entire campus looked like something out of a Victorian architecture catalogue. Wrought iron gates, immaculate gardens, carved marble fountains, and students parading around in tailored uniforms, genuine leather backpacks, and cars that cost more than entire houses. Among the security guards and drivers, one figure stood out completely: a girl standing on the opposite sidewalk, huddled under the awning of a closed coffee shop. She was barefoot, her feet bandaged with damp cloths. She clutched a tattered notebook and a plastic bag with 2 apples inside to her chest. Her eyes roamed the school gate like someone dreaming, but had already given up on believing. A group of students laughed when they saw her there. One of them took out her cell phone and started filming. Another shouted, "Go away, sewer girl! You think you're going to get in here?" She stood still, as if she were already used to it. The security guard at the entrance just watched, impassive. A black SUV stopped across the street, and an elegant woman hurried out, pulling a boy with a crooked tie. Seeing the poor girl standing in front of the school, she stopped. "That homeless woman is still here? This is absurd. I'm calling the council," she exclaimed. The girl lowered her head. One of the students threw an empty coffee cup at her feet. The security guard stepped forward to pull her away. And just then a dark blue Mercedes stopped in front of the main gate. Tinted windows. Silence. The driver got out and, completely unexpectedly, opened the back door, and Mr. Lancaster himself, the school's founder and president, got out. All eyes turned to him. An imposing man in a charcoal blue suit with greying hair and an air that blended coldness with absolute authority. But this time, there was something different in his expression. He didn't look at anyone, just walked toward the girl. She didn't move. He stopped less than a meter away. The silence was total. Even the birds seemed to cease their songs. Without saying a word, he extended his hand to her. She hesitated, looked around, and everyone seemed frozen, as if time had stopped. When she finally touched his hand, the scene exploded into whispers, gasps, and looks of pure shock. He led her into the school, passing through the crowd that parted like a sea. Entering the auditorium where a welcoming ceremony was taking place, he took the stage with her at his side. He took the microphone. The first thing he said was, "This girl has just become the first lifetime honor student in the history of Crownwood Academy." And no one here has the right to question that. What happened next did more than change the course of a school. It changed the course of the entire city. She didn't officially call herself anything. Her real name had been lost in an Alabama registry office when the hospital where she was born burned down, along with the last document recording her existence. She grew up under the name Case Door 97B in a Montgomery shelter for abandoned children, where the nights were as cold as the staff who served watery soup in cracked bowls. At 4, she still couldn't speak properly. At 6, she could read in secret, rummaging through books donated by charity. But it was at 8 that everything changed. A wealthy couple adopted her. For a month. 1 month. Long enough for her to experience what it was like to sleep in a warm bed, take a hot bath, wear new clothes, but also long enough to discover that love, in many cases, is just a contract with an expiration date. After a misunderstanding with the couple's biological son, who said she stole an expensive toy, she was returned as if she were defective merchandise. He never tried to get attached to anyone again. She grew up in shelters, foster homes, and welfare programs. As a teenager, she developed a firm but never aggressive gaze, a firmness that came from suppressed pain, hidden hunger, and fear that became routine. At 12, she lost the only person she called family, little Hannah, a mute girl with whom she shared a bunk bed in a Rochester orphanage. When Hannah died from medical neglect, she didn't cry. She buried a promise beside her friend's frail body. "One day, I'm going to go to that school we saw on TV, the one with the huge gardens, even if I have to sleep on the floor to do it." It was Crownwood Academy. Ever since, she'd kept magazine clippings, faded ink-printed photos from the public library, and even a wet pamphlet she'd found in the trash. Everything about that school. She didn't want to go in there for revenge or to prove anything. She wanted to learn, that was all. She wanted to understand why people with money seemed to live in another world, another language. She wanted to decipher the secret of those who never fear tomorrow. And even living in a shelter in Brooklyn, sharing a bunk bed with an addicted girl and eating expired bread, she never stopped studying. She taught herself French, finance, logic, and a little programming. She did it all using Wi-Fi stolen from a nearby diner. But no one knew. No one saw her wiping her feet on the sidewalk before sneaking into the public libraries. No one realized that the girl who sat on the Crownwood sidewalk every day at 6:45 wasn't begging for food. She was just reading, watching, waiting, until that day when someone finally saw her. Until the moment when the most unlikely man of all, the same man who had created that unreachable world, reached out his hand. And when he touched her, he had no idea he had crossed paths with her before. Many years before, on a night when his daughter was crying and a stranger held her hand in the hospital. On the morning of Crownwood Academy's welcome ceremony, the atmosphere was a theatrical display of vanity and competition. Parents went to greater lengths than their children to flaunt their power. Swiss watches, exclusive handbags, tailored Italian suits, every detail rehearsed like a parade of status. The main hall was adorned with gold drapes and crystal chandeliers, and outside, a line of luxury cars stretched like a carpet of arrogance. Against this backdrop, a group of young people gathered beside the marble fountain. It was the Lancaster Circle, formed by the children of the elite who felt entitled to control even who could breathe the same air as them. Among them, Theodore, the son of one of the school's shareholders, scornfully floated the idea. "I bet you $100 she can't even stand 5 minutes at the school gates today." The others laughed. A girl with platinum blonde hair added, "I bet you $200 the security guard will kick her out before then." "What if she gets in?" one of them said, laughing out loud. "If she comes in, I'll give her my seat in the VIP room," Theodore mocked, provoking laughter. The bet was made like a cruel game, but it had a hidden agenda, to expose the girl. They knew she showed up every day, always at the same time, always with the same look of someone who longed to belong. Theodore, whose family controlled part of the school board, was bothered by her presence. Not because she posed a danger, but because she was an uncomfortable reminder of everything they pretended didn't exist. Poverty, effort, purity. And that somehow threatened the small empire of superiority they had created around themselves. So they decided to film it. They positioned their cell phones at strategic angles, like traps. One of the students pretended to trip near her to provoke a reaction. Another deliberately knocked a glass of red juice over her only notebook, but she didn't react. She wiped the juice with her sleeve and remained seated, without saying a word. The humiliation escalated when one of the boys played circus music on his cell phone speaker while she tried to shelter from the rain. The audience of parents, students, and even teachers laughed, complicit in the cruelty disguised as a joke. It was at that moment that a teacher approached. Mrs. Irene. Grey hair, thick glasses, the oldest. Member of the staff. With firm steps, she placed herself between the girl and the students. This isn't a joke, this is cruel. But before she could do anything else, she was discreetly reprimanded by another teacher who pulled her aside. It's not worth it. You'll get in trouble with the council. And she, with tears in her eyes, remained silent. The girl didn't get up. She remained there, soaked, trembling, but with her eyes fixed on the entrance. The same place where, when she was 9, she had been denied entry with a fake invitation she'd forged to attend a public performance. Back then she'd cried, not now. Today she knew she didn't need pity, she just needed a chance. And as everyone laughed, pointing and filming, the sound of tires slowly approaching broke through the hubbub. The dark blue Mercedes stopped, the window rolled down. And then, everything changed. Mr. Lancaster wasn't just the name behind Crownwood Academy. He was the architect of everything that institution represented. Excellence, exclusivity, eliteness. He rarely appeared in public, especially at everyday events like a welcoming ceremony. His presence was always a sign that something important was about to happen. But no one there, absolutely no one, expected that something important to have the fragile face and silent eyes of the poor girl sitting in the rain. When he got out of the car, he didn't look at the influential parents or the teachers lined up at the entrance. His eyes went straight to her. The silence that followed seemed unreal. The laughter stopped like a knife. He walked slowly toward her, unhurried, his firm steps echoing on the wet marble sidewalk. When he stopped in front of her, the gesture was simple. He extended his hand. She hesitated. No one had ever reached out to her like that. For a moment she thought it was a trap. But something in his expression, something almost familiar, made her look up. And when her skin touched his, something inexplicable passed between them. He helped her to her feet, took off his own jacket and draped it over her shoulders. A murmur cut through the silence. "Is he crazy?" a mother whispered. "This will tarnish the school's image," a teacher whispered. He ignored everything. He walked with her through the crowd, which parted like a corridor of astonishment. One student tried to film, but a security guard firmly lowered his phone. Lancaster said nothing until he entered the building. He led the girl straight to the auditorium, where the main event was taking place. The stage, decorated with expensive flowers and institutional flags, welcomed the new students with pompous speeches and classical music. As soon as he entered, the masters of ceremonies stopped. The musicians silenced their instruments. He took the stage with the girl at his side. A microphone was hurriedly brought in. He took the floor. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "Before I continue with my prepared speeches, I need to make an announcement. This young woman beside me is, as of today, an honorary student of this institution, with a full scholarship, full board, and full access to all school activities and programs." A collective sigh swept the room, but he didn't stop there. "This is not a philanthropic decision. I'm not here to inspire anyone with a good deed. I'm here to right a wrong, because many years ago this school failed. I failed." The girl remained silent, still with his jacket draped over. Her shoulders, she seemed too small for the stage, but at the same time her presence filled every inch of the space. She didn't fully understand what was happening. She only knew that, for some reason, this powerful man was treating her like someone who mattered, and that in itself was a miracle. He turned to her for a moment and whispered almost imperceptibly, "I recognized you. I didn't tell the others. But you saved my daughter, didn't you?" She didn't answer. She just lowered her eyes. And in that gesture there was everything. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Mr. Lancaster's decision fell like a bombshell among New York's elite social circles. Discreet headlines began appearing in local newspapers. Crownwood Academy takes in homeless student. Founder's controversial decision divides parents. Billionaire breaks protocol and opens gates to unknown girl. In the cafeteria, the hallways, and even the teachers' lounges, the buzz was constant. Some tried to hide their discomfort. Some hid behind polite smiles, and others made their contempt clear. Among the students, the hostility was subtle but constant. Muffled giggles, judgmental looks, cruel nicknames whispered like venom. She, in turn, tried to go unnoticed. She didn't use the privileges granted. She rejected the single room, preferring to stay in the scholarship students' wing. She walked with her head down, never ate more than an apple and a piece of bread, and didn't even touch the new tablets the school provided. But even in silence, her presence was irritating. She disrupted the school's invisible balance, a structure set up to exclude, now forced to accept, what it had always despised. The height of her discomfort came one Saturday during the traditional alma mater ceremony, where each new student was required to take the stage and say a sentence about their future dreams. When her name was called, there was absolute silence. She ascended slowly, her hands trembling, her gaze fixed on the floor. Before she could speak, someone in the audience shouted, "Is your dream to have food on your plate?" And the auditorium erupted in laughter. The girl froze. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. The microphone trembled in her hand. Then came the final blow. Theodore, with a lopsided smile, stood up and said loudly, "Or maybe her dream is to marry a millionaire and escape the slums." The audience laughed even harder. Teachers didn't intervene. The principals just watched. Mr. Lancaster wasn't there at that moment, and the girl, alone, vulnerable, exposed under the spotlight, walked down the stage in silence. No words, no response, only the muffled sound of laughter behind her and the tightness in her chest. But that night, in the empty cafeteria, she wrote something in her destroyed notebook. "They think I'm here for charity. They don't know anything. I saw his daughter bleed in my arms. I carried her to the hospital. I lied about my name so I wouldn't be taken back to the shelter. And now I'm here, and they have no idea who I am." The public humiliation had been fulfilled, but inside her, an invisible thread of dignity was beginning to strain, and no one imagined that, behind that quiet gaze, lay a powerful memory, and a secret that could turn everything upside down. The morning after her humiliation, she didn't show up for breakfast. She didn't go to class, or to the library. During lunch, whispers began to circulate. Did she leave? I think they expelled her. Or she dropped out, poor thing. But in truth she was there, in the forgotten attic of the art building, where broken chairs, old frames, and dusty portraits of the school's former founders were piled. She found that place by chance when she was seeking silence, and it was there amid shadows and memories that she decided she wouldn't leave with her head down. She would wait, silently, and when the right moment came, she would speak. That moment came 2 days later, during a world history class with Professor Daltrey, known for his heated discussions of social inequality. The day's topic was historical injustice. Someone commented, "Some are born to succeed, others to mop floors. It's always been that way." Laughter. The professor fell silent. And before he could intervene, a calm voice emerged from the back of the room. It was her. Not always. Sometimes the one mopping the floor carries a lifetime on their shoulders that you couldn't bear for a week. Sometimes the one who has nothing gives the most. Silence. She stood, her hands steady, her voice measured. "You laughed at me on stage, but you didn't know that years ago I was in the hospital when Mr. Lancaster's daughter was hit by a car. I pulled her from the street, bleeding, and carried her to the emergency room. I stayed by her side until the surgery was over. She held my hand. A murmur ran through the room. I used a fake name because I didn't want to go back to the shelter. And then, no one came looking for me. But she told me about this school, said she'd bring me here one day. She pulled a folded yellowed piece of paper from her backpack, a child's notebook with marker drawings on it. Crownwood is your home, I promise. Signed, Alice Lancaster. The signature of the founder's daughter. The teacher came closer, looked at the paper and widened his eyes. Is this really his daughter's? The girl just nodded. He didn't know? Now he knows. And then she sat. Down. The buzz filled the campus. Within hours, the paper had been photographed and circulated in internal groups. Some professors commented among themselves, could it be true? Others said, she might have forged it. But no one had the courage to confront her, because for the first time there was something stronger than prejudice there, doubt. And in that void between certainty and shame, she began to walk with a different weight in her eyes. Not the weight of someone carrying pain, but of someone carrying the truth, and that de-scares more than any wealth. At the end of the day, when class ended, Theodore passed her in the hallway. He didn't mock her. He didn't smile. He simply looked away, and in that uncomfortable silence, she knew the humiliation had become a seed, and the seed was about to blossom. The news spread like wildfire through the aristocratic halls of Crownwood and beyond the school walls. But it was at Mr. Lancaster's own home, at the end of an exhaustive meeting, that the revelation finally reached him. One of his assistants entered the private library, holding a crumpled copy of the sheet drawn by Alice Lancaster, his daughter. The billionaire frowned at the sight of the girl's name and the childish drawing. His eyes widened. The handwriting, the signature. He remembered, but it wasn't just that. It was the smell of the hospital, the image of Alice with her bandaged arm saying, "She held my hand the whole time. Daddy, she was like an invisible sister." At the time, he thought it was the daydream of a traumatized child. He never investigated, never looked. And now, the face of the girl beside his daughter in that forgotten memory took shape, voice, flesh, and it was there, inside the school he built with his own hands. He was silent for several minutes, staring at the notebook paper as if it were a testament. Then he called his daughter, who was living in France. Her voice came cheerfully on the other end. "Dad!" He didn't wait. "Alice, that girl, the one who held your hand when you were run over. Do you remember her?" There was a pause, and then the answer came, charged with emotion. "Of course I remember, Dad. She wore a blouse with a button missing, and she had sad but beautiful eyes. I wrote her a letter." "Why?" He swallowed hard. "She's here. At school." The silence on the other end turned to tears. "Really? She came back?" "No," he said. "She never left. We just never saw her." The next day, Mr. Lancaster called all board members to a special meeting. The atmosphere was tense. Some shareholders wanted to revoke the girl's scholarship, claiming she was emotionally manipulating the institution. He didn't respond. He simply placed the sheet of paper on the table and said, "This sheet of paper is the only thing more valuable than any donation you've ever made. You paid for your children to come here. She nearly died to save what I loved most." The meeting ended without applause, but no one dared to challenge him. That night he rummaged through his old office and found an old security camera recording. The hospital. The girl running, carrying her daughter in her arms. The medical record signed with a false name. He watched it all with teary eyes. For the first time in years, the cold, calculating man, the symbol of meritocracy, realized that his debt wasn't to charity. It was to the truth. And now, the truth walked the halls of his school, with light but immense steps. The next morning she didn't show up. Not in the cafeteria, not in class, not in the attic. The room she used in the scholarship wing was perfectly made. The bed was straightened, her few belongings folded on the pillow, and in the center of the bedspread, an envelope with the Crownwood crest hand-drawn. Inside, a letter. "Thank you for letting me in, but I don't belong here, not for lack of trying, but for too much remembering. I'm going where my presence isn't a burden, where the silence doesn't scream so much. Where I can help others like me, with love, the girl at the door. No last name, no signature. The letter was discreetly left in Mr. Lancaster's office. When he read it, he felt a weight he hadn't recognized, a tightness that came not from guilt, but from absence. It was as if, upon realizing who she truly was, he had become blind again. She was before him every day, and he only saw her when it was too late. For days, he sent people to search for her. No one knew how to answer, not the shelter where she lived, not the cafes where she picked up leftovers. It was as if she had dissolved into the streets, returned to anonymity where the world kept her invisible. The school routine continued, but something had changed. There was an empty chair in the main room, a living absence in the hallways. The group of students who had humiliated her were now quieter. Theodore, once arrogant, was seen several times sitting alone in the garden, staring at the ground. The laughter faded. The teasing ceased. Something about that departure had left a trail of shame, and for many the emptiness spoke louder than any speech. Mr. Lancaster, for his part, sank into silent reflection. He ordered the installation of a new wing of the library with books accessible to day students. He created an anonymous scholarship program in the name of AML, his daughter's initials, but secretly also hers. He began to quietly frequent public spaces, chatting with teenagers who reminded him of her. But deep down, he missed something he'd never truly had, her presence. Not because of the charity she'd refused, but because of the dignity he saw in her eyes, because of the memory she carried, and the quiet courage she left as a legacy. The impact of her disappearance wasn't limited to the halls of Crownwood. Some students began to question what merit really meant at a school where everyone bought their position with their last name or donation. Uncomfortable parents began to pressure the administration. They wanted answers. They wanted the girl next door out of the headlines. But it was too late. What should have been a hushed scandal became a wave. A short video, recorded without permission, in which she talks in class about holding Mr. Lancaster's daughter's hand, leaked onto social media. Within days, the video surpassed 1 million views. Alternative news channels, social media influencers, and even mainstream newspapers began reporting. The girl who saved a millionaire, heiress, and was humiliated while trying to study. Public opinion was divided, but most were moved. The school's social media was flooded with messages. Where is she? She needs to come back. Crownwood owes her more than a scholarship. The hashtag #JewelGirlFromTheDoor trended for 2 consecutive days. Some teachers tried to silence the movement, but students themselves began posting posters on the walls with the phrase, "She knew everything," and she stayed silent. Inside the school, discomfort turned to anguish. The dean resigned. 2 teachers were dismissed after prejudiced comments came to light. Theodore, the most hated boy in the academy's recent history, tried to deny involvement, but an old video of him mocking the girl during the ceremony leaked. The internet's wrath was unforgiving. His name was associated with the hashtag clase podre. His family tried to hire lawyers, but all seemed futile. The public trial had already taken place. During an extraordinary meeting, the students themselves demanded changes. Mr. Lancaster watched it all without saying a word. He observed every manifestation, every gesture, like someone watching an avalanche he himself unintentionally provoked. Not with anger, but with shame. For the first time, the school he had created was being reshaped from the inside out, not by committees or rules, but by consequence. He began walking the halls alone, without bodyguards, without ostentation. One day, he stopped at the auditorium door and stared at the empty chair where she had sat. No one dared to take that seat. It was as if her absence had become an absolute presence, and there, in that pulsating void, he realized she didn't need to be physically there to be the most present figure in the entire school. She had already become what no one there had ever imagined, a symbol, an echo no one could silence. Mr. Lancaster, the man known for his impenetrable demeanor and impersonal decisions, began to disappear from the public eye. He cancelled appearances, refused interviews, and stopped attending the millionaire dinners where he was always the most anticipated presence. The reason was simple: her absence. It wasn't guilt. It was transformation. Something invisible had broken inside him, and the silence she left behind with her departure was the final straw. He began visiting public schools anonymously. He sat in the back of classrooms, listening to teachers struggle with the lack of infrastructure, watching children sleep on broken desks. One day, in a rundown school in the Bronx, he watched a girl answer an algebra problem with such logic and clarity that his chest tightened. She reminded him of her. He returned to Crownwood late on a grey afternoon. He called the trustees together and announced the biggest institutional change since its founding. Half the seats would be reserved for low-income students, with evaluation processes not based on appearance, resume, or last name, but on potential. The board nearly fainted. One of the shareholders shouted, "You're going to destroy the school's reputation." And Lancaster simply replied, "The school's reputation has already been saved by those you humiliated." In the weeks that followed, he began to live differently. He anonymously donated millions to social projects. He stopped using armored cars. He started walking to work. Even Crownwood employees began to notice. He greeted all the doormen by name. He chatted with the cleaning ladies as if they were fellow administrators. One day he sat in the cafeteria among the students. He ate the same food. Someone whispered, "What happened to him?" No one knew how to answer, but everyone felt it. Within himself, Mr. Lancaster constantly relived the memory of the girl sitting in the rain, clutching the wet notebook. He relived the touch of her hand, her silent eyes. And even without knowing where she was, he felt her presence shaping every decision he made. She had become the mirror he had avoided his entire life. And in facing that reflection, he discovered a truth no amount of money can buy. Greatness lies not in what one has, but in what one silently offers. The reunion happened when no one expected it, and perhaps that's why it was so overwhelming. It was early spring, and Crownwood was organizing for the first time an event open to the public, the Courage Fair, focusing on community initiatives and social projects led by young people from marginalized neighborhoods. It was an idea, reluctantly approved by the board, but fervently promoted by Mr. Lancaster himself. He insisted that the central courtyard be open to the public, that there be no badges or visible hierarchy, just tables, stories, and truths. For hours he wandered through the tents, talking to students, listening to stories of teenagers who escaped crime thanks to theater workshops, or who learned to read with volunteers. He felt inspired, touched, but incomplete. It was like searching for a shadow without knowing where the light begins. And it was when he turned, hearing a child's laughter, that time stood still. There, sitting beneath a tree, her hair simply tied back and wearing a blue dress that looked handmade, she smiled. Surrounded by small children, she was teaching one of them to write her own name in an old notebook. No flashy necklaces, no makeup, no posing. But there was a light so genuine about her that the sun itself seemed to bow its head. He walked toward her without saying a word. His steps were slow, as if the ground demanded reverence. When she noticed him, her eyes didn't widen. They just softened, as if she'd known this moment was coming. The children ran when they saw his dark suit, and for a few seconds they stood face to face, the man who built walls and the girl who broke through them all. "I looked for you," he said in a whisper. "I know," she replied, her voice calm. "Why did you disappear?" "Because my place was never among marble columns. My place is where people's eyes still shine with learning." He didn't answer. He simply sat beside her on the floor, uncaringly soiling his expensive pants. And, in a symbolic gesture, he picked up a pencil and began copying the children's names onto their papers with her. When a boy asked, "Sir, are you her teacher?" Lancaster smiled, and for the first time in his life he answered truthfully, "No, she's my teacher." That's how they met again. Without fanfare, without press, without an audience. Just two worlds, touching again. And this time, with the knowledge that their story didn't need castles or contracts. Just truth. Dusk was already falling, tinting the sky a pale gold, when Mr. Lancaster, still sitting beside her under the tree, took a deep breath. He had spent his life giving orders, signing contracts, running empires. But now, here, before this girl who had once been just a shadow in the crowd, his voice trembled. You changed everything. The school, the students, the way I see the world. I wish you would come back. As a student, as a counselor, as whatever you want. I can build a wing named after you. Fund whatever you want. Just tell me what you need. She remained silent for a moment, observing the colorful papers the children had left around her. She picked up one of them, where a girl had written love in crooked letters. She showed it to him. What I needed was this. A place where my name wouldn't be mocked. A place where a child could learn to write the word love, without fear of being corrected for having dirty hands. He looked at her with teary eyes, and for the first time in decades, he seemed vulnerable. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know. But if I had the chance... She looked up slowly, without anger, without hurt, but with a peace so profound it would disarm any army. It's not about deserving. It's about understanding. And you understood. He wanted to ask if that was a yes, if she would return, if she accepted the invitation. But she cut him off before he could even open his mouth. I'm not going back to Crownwood, Mr. Lancaster, but I will accept something even greater. She stood, smoothing her dress with her hands. I will accept that the world can be transformed from the most unlikely crack. And you were one of those cracks. He stood slowly, head down, but with a subtle smile. Can I help you? From the outside. She nodded. Yes, but no microphones, no plaques with my name on them, no trophies. Just build. And if you can, build like someone who knows what it's like to be invisible. And then she extended her hand. He shook it with both hands, silently grateful. And in that grip, they sealed something greater than any diploma, the agreement of two worlds that, for a brief moment, decided to walk side by side, even on different paths. In a forgotten Brooklyn neighborhood, amid abandoned buildings and cracked sidewalks, a small, simple house was renovated with recycled wood, donated paint, and volunteer hands. There was no sign on the door, just a mural painted by children where colors danced freely with no lines to contain them. Inside, makeshift desks made from grocery boxes served as shelter for small but urgent dreams. And in the center of the room, an old chalkboard bore the words, "Here no one starts from behind." Across town, Mr. Lancaster watched the scene from inside a regular car, parked discreetly on the corner. No escort, no photographers. He was wearing jeans for the first time in years. He watched the children enter the space with torn backpacks, wide smiles, and eyes he'd never known before. When she appeared, helping a boy carry a bag of used books, he didn't get out. He just smiled. She didn't look in his direction either. But for a brief moment, as if sensing something, she touched her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was that old yellowed clipping from the Crownwood brochure. She carefully pinned it to a corkboard next to drawings, poems, and a world map, made with colored pencils. Then she walked to the garden and watered the plants with a cut-up plastic bottle. The wind blew lightly, and a page from the notebook fluttered into the middle of the street. Lancaster's car didn't move. He just watched the page dance in the air as if carrying the memory of what had been and what would never be again. The camera slowly pulls away. No epic score, no final sentence. Just the sound of children's laughter, the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind, and the silent certainty that justice doesn't always need to be declared. Sometimes it just needs to be felt and lived. If you've made it this far, it's because this story touched you in some way. So comment below, "I saw courage where no one wanted to look," just so I know you're among those who truly feel it. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell, because stories like this deserve to be shared. And now, click on the video that's appearing on the screen. It's another real, intense, and transformative story, and I'm sure you'll feel it all over again.